The Dutch Golden Age, celebrated for its wealth and art, has a hidden history built on controversial practices. Beneath the surface of their success lies a story of exploitation, monopoly, and unchecked ambition. Today, we'll uncover 10 questionable methods the Dutch used to dominate the world economy. Stay tuned as we reveal the shocking truths about this golden era of Dutch history. Number 10. Slave trade. The Dutch were central to the transatlantic slave trade, transporting over 600,000 enslaved Africans by the mid-17th century. These individuals were forced to work on plantations across the Americas, producing lucrative commodities like sugar, tobacco, and cotton. The Dutch West India Company, WEC, profited immensely, earning millions of guilders annually. Enslaved people were treated as commodities, bought for as little as 50 guilders and sold for 5 times that amount in the Americas. This horrific trade built a foundation of wealth for Dutch cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam, leaving a legacy of pain and injustice. Number 9. Colonial exploitation. The Dutch established colonies in Indonesia, Suriname, and the Caribbean, extracting resources such as spices, sugar, and coffee. The spice trade alone brought in annual revenues equivalent to billions in today's currency. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, controlled vast territories, imposing brutal systems of forced labor and taxation. For instance, in Indonesia, the Dutch coerced locals into growing spices like nutmeg and cloves, selling them at exorbitant prices in Europe. This exploitation funded opulent lifestyles in the Netherlands, while devastating native communities, stripping them of autonomy and resources. Number 8. Triangular trade. The triangular trade was a vast network connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Dutch ships carried manufactured goods like guns and textiles to Africa, exchanged them for enslaved people, transported the enslaved to the Americas, and returned with sugar, tobacco, and other commodities. This cycle generated immense profits, with some ships earning returns of 300% per voyage. Dutch banks financed these operations, ensuring a steady flow of wealth. This trade not only enriched merchants, but also fueled the economies of Dutch cities, cementing their position as a global trading powerhouse. Number 7. Monopolies and cartels. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, was the world's first multinational corporation, holding a monopoly on spice trade routes. At its peak, the VOC was worth over $7.9 trillion in today's dollars. By controlling prices and supply, the VOC ensured sky-high profits, often at the expense of local producers. The Dutch West India Company, WIC, operated similarly in the Americas. These monopolies crushed competition and relied on aggressive tactics, including military force and political coercion, to maintain dominance. This concentration of wealth fueled the Dutch economy, but left a trail of destruction in its wake. Number 6. Piracy and privateering. Dutch privateers, operating under government-issued letters of marque, targeted enemy ships during wartime. They seized gold, silver, and goods like silk and spices, which were then sold in Dutch ports. One famous privateer, Piet Hein, captured a Spanish treasure fleet in 1628, netting 11.5 million guilders, a fortune equivalent to hundreds of millions today. These acts weakened rival nations like Spain and Portugal while enriching the Dutch. Though technically legal during wartime, these raids often bordered on outright piracy, showing how the Dutch blurred moral and legal boundaries to gain an edge. Number 5. Illegal slave trade. Even after the legal abolition of the slave trade in certain regions, Dutch merchants continued this practice clandestinely. Smuggling enslaved people through hidden trade routes, they avoided detection while reaping massive profits. By the late 18th century, the illegal slave trade was estimated to involve tens of thousands of individuals annually. Ships carrying enslaved people would often disguise their cargo or falsify records. These illegal activities prolonged the suffering of countless individuals and demonstrated the lengths to which traders would go to secure financial gains. Number 4. Natural resource exploitation. In colonies like Indonesia, the Dutch exploited natural resources, including spices, rubber, and minerals. They implemented the cultivation system, forcing farmers to dedicate portions of their land to cash crops for export. This system funneled wealth back to the Netherlands, with colonial exports contributing over 20% to Dutch GDP by the 19th century. Forests were stripped for timber, rivers were mined for gold, and fertile lands were drained for plantations. This extraction devastated local ecosystems and communities, fueling the Dutch economy at an enormous human and environmental cost. Number 3. Arms trade. The Dutch played a pivotal role in the global arms trade during the Golden Age, supplying weapons to warring nations, colonial armies, and insurgent groups. Dutch merchants sold muskets, cannons, and gunpowder to European powers like England, France, and Spain, while also arming factions in Africa and Asia. In some instances, they provided both sides of a conflict with weapons, ensuring profits regardless of the outcome. By the 17th century, arms sales contributed millions of guilders annually to the Dutch economy. One notable example was the Dutch involvement in West Africa, where they exchanged firearms for enslaved people, fueling both war and the transatlantic slave trade. These transactions destabilized entire regions while cementing Dutch dominance in global trade, showcasing the ruthless pursuit of wealth through militarization. Number 2. Religious persecution for economic gain. The Dutch targeted religious minorities, such as Jews and Catholics, under the guise of religious purity. Properties were confiscated, and wealth was seized from these groups. In some cases, persecuted individuals fled, leaving behind land and businesses that the state or private individuals absorbed. For example, during the Spanish Inquisition in the Netherlands, Dutch Calvinists took over Catholic properties, redirecting their wealth into Protestant hands. This tactic intertwined religion and greed, showing how economic motives often disguise themselves as moral righteousness. Number 1. Financial speculation and manipulation. The Dutch pioneered the world's first stock exchange in Amsterdam, laying the groundwork for modern financial markets. While this was revolutionary, it also gave rise to rampant speculation and manipulation. One infamous example is tulip mania in the 1630s, where the price of tulip bulbs soared to absurd levels. A single rare bulb could sell for 10,000 guilders, roughly the cost of a luxurious canal-side home. When the bubble burst, many investors were ruined, while savvy speculators walked away with fortunes. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, further manipulated markets by inflating stock prices and withholding dividends to enrich insiders. These speculative practices brought immense wealth but left others financially devastated. The Dutch Golden Age wasn't just a story of innovation and cultural brilliance. It was also a tale of exploitation, greed, and questionable ethics. By examining these shady practices, we can better understand the complexities of history and the human cost of wealth. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.